one, go.
Today is Mahashivratri, the night when Hindus across the world stay up all night praying to Lord Shiva and Parvati Devi in order to overcome the darkness, ignorance, and turmoil around and within us. This is the night of Shiva and Parvati's marriage, the convergence of the male and female divine energies so that there is balance in the world. Turmoil and imbalance is the state we are in India and the world, as we will hear from our interfaith panel today. We shed tears for the more than 2.6 million people who have died from COVID worldwide, and from the 248 Indian farmers who have died in the protests they have sustained for several months now. Just like the farmers and their allies who are putting themselves in harm's way, just like everyone who protested the CAA a year ago, each of our speakers today works for justice and peace with the fervor of Lord Shiva's dance for renewal, regeneration, and balance in our universe. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Vandanan Mrityormukshiya Mamritat. Om. We worship you and we adore you, O three-eyed one, O Lord Shiva. You are sweet gladness, the fragrance of life, who nourishes us, restores our health, and causes us to thrive. As in due time, the stem of the plant weakens and the fruit is freed from the vine, so free us, Lord Shiva, from attachment and death, and do not withhold immortality. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. I'm Sunita Vishwanath, and I'm a co-founder of Hindus for Human Rights, and I welcome you all to our special event as part of Sacred People, Sacred Earth Global Day of Climate Action, which is co-sponsored with our dear friends at Green Faith International. Before I hand over to my colleague Vijendra Kadalabal, board member of Hindus for Human Rights, a few housekeeping rules. Only the speakers will have video and audio privileges. We hope to have a 15 to 20-minute Q&A at the end. Questions can be typed in chat. Please direct them to a panelist. Please be civil. Anyone being uncivil will be removed from the event. We're aiming for the event to go for 75 minutes or maximum 90 minutes. Over to you, Vijay.
Thank you, Sunita. Namaste to everyone from India. My name is Vijayendra Kadalabal, and I come from a small village, Kadalabal, in South India. Like Sunita said, I am I'm one of the board of directors in Hindus for Human Rights, and very grateful that Sunita gave us the platform to have a dialogue where Hinduism can be differentiated with Hindutva. I am a youth organizer in Karnataka, which is a state in South India, leading a youth movement which focuses on preserving and defending the constitutional values of equality and justice. We currently have 3,000 youth mobilized working with us and working in 3 states. Like I said, the title, How Hindutva is Harming the Planet, is of utmost importance for a couple of reasons. One, the understanding that Hinduism is not Hindutva. Hindutva is clearly a political ideology, a political space which is authoritative, which is very corporatish in its governing style, and hence naturally becomes not a very good option for environment. To cite a couple of examples of why the existing ideology of Hindutva is anti-science, anti-environment, and anti-farmer, I think we have had examples of the Prime Minister going on record and citing mythology to be scientifically confusing mythology as facts in science conferences. We have had the government do multiple reforms in Land Acquisition Act, which forbids the tribals to have a right to say when government decides to acquire lands. We have had multiple, as many as 19 amendments in the ways in which ease the government to give away land to corporates by bypassing any kind of uh, social impact assessment which was earlier required. Today, the government can in any day give away the land without the requirement of the social impact assessment for any particular company. Uh, in terms of how it's anti-farmer, I would quote the most recent example of the largest farmers' protest that we are witnessing. Just by not giving them the platform to voice their opinions, claiming them to be anti-nationals and separatists, because they want to have a say in what they do, makes them anti-farmer, not including the farmer in the dialogue of a policy which is meant for farmers. And it makes it's utmost important that this panel today is interfaith, because India is a diverse secular country. So it has multiple cultures, multiple perspectives, most of which speak of peace and humanity, and it's important to get those perspectives in this panel. uh, I would also like to introduce Dr. Fletcher Harper. He is the Executive Director of Green Faith International. Green Faith International is also our co-sponsor, like Sunita mentioned. And I would like Fletcher to introduce and take over from me. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Sunita and Vijay. It's a real privilege to be with you all today. Green Faith is an international interfaith climate and environmental justice alliance. And today is a special day for the Green Faith community because it's been designated as a global multi-faith day of climate action. And there are more than 400 actions taking place, grassroots multi-faith actions taking place in 45 countries, supported by sign-ons from 200 plus high-level, high-ranking religious leaders in support of 10 very, very strong demands for governments and financial institutions. Demands like an end to new fossil fuel infrastructure, an end to tropical deforestation, an end to industrial agriculture and related financing for all of those deadly industries, a very, very strong commitment to ensuring that absolutely everybody has access to clean and affordable energy, that there is a strong commitment to a just and equitable transition so that workers and communities are deeply involved in planning a sustainable future, and also a warm welcome for those who we know will be displaced from their homes by climate change. So in the midst of all of these important demands, there's a pattern that we are seeing globally, which leads me to be passionately interested in what we're going to learn about today. What we see around the world is three interrelated centers of power that are at the heart of the problems that we face. The first two are obvious. It's a authoritarian, increasingly ineffective or authoritarian style of government, which we see emerging in so many different places around the world. And Vijay described a number of the characteristics that those governments often share. A corporatist style, a preference for working only for the well-being of the wealthy, a disdain for science when it gets in their way, a deep sense of ethnic nationalism, and an encouragement of violence and disregard towards the human rights of those who do not fit within that very tightly defined ethnic nationalist character, wherever that may be in the world. and so on. So this sort of style of governance as a political reality is one source of the problem. A second source of the problem is powerful, extractive, exploitive, destructive economic styles of operation, epitomized by the fossil fuel sector and very often by the industrial agriculture, corporate agriculture sector, which will stop at nothing to extract every last ounce of raw material from the earth, leaving devastation, displaced communities, and a totally unsustainable future in their wake. And when we talk about that extractive economy, we know that that also includes the financial sector, banks, investors, and insurance companies, which make the operation of that sector possible. So if we've got authoritarian government and destructive extractive economy as the first two, the third leg of that stool is extremist cultural and religious forces, which in a perversion of all of the world's religions are lining up behind this destructive political economic pairing and adding a devastatingly evil moral justification to it. We see this pattern on full display in countries like the United States, where the Christian right for decades has been undermining progress on climate change. We see it more recently in Brazil, where the so-called evangelical bench has de facto control of the Brazilian government and is supportive of its policies that are destroying the Amazon while violating the rights of indigenous peoples. And I'm here today because of concern that there are similarities that we need to learn from and be aware of from the context in India. And I'm deeply grateful to my Indian colleagues on this call with the courage to speak out about this challenging and important and fraught issue. And so Vijay, I'll pass back to you with those contextual words and with a deep appreciation from the global Green Faith community to all of you. And we are all ears and eager to learn.
Actually, I'll go next. Fletcher, thank you so much for contextualizing our conversation. We're talking about the situation in India, but we are deeply aware that, that we're all connected, interconnected. And so what I want to do next is invite all of our panelists, and I'm so glad Sister Muniza is back. She's having problems with internet, and I hope that we keep her. I would like each of our panelists to just take a minute to introduce yourselves. Who are you? Where are you? And what motivates you? And this is the place for those of our panelists who are motivated by faith to explain that connection of faith or whatever the motivation is and what you do in this world. And so we'll just go one by one. Let's start with, because we have Muniza, Sister Muniza, let's go with you first so that while you're here, we can hear from you. Sister Muniza. You're muted, Sister Muniza.
Muniza, we can't hear you. You are muted.
Okay, we'll come back to Sister. Father Anand, will you go first?
Okay. I am Anand Matthew, called Father Anand. I live in Varanasi city. Today, the city is celebrating Mahashivratri. So happy Mahashivratri wishes to all my Hindu friends, Hindu brothers and sisters. I work in a media center. I was very happy to hear from Reverend Fletcher. He has put us into the right mood, this world scenario he has put. I have been working in this center for last 27 years. And from 1998 onwards, full-time into environmental work along with the other media work. We give media support to all types of social, religious, environmental issues. Those who work for these cause, we give them media support. When we say media, it's mainly the indigenous media or the low-cost media, theater, songs, and other things. We do also use digital media. So I have at present a program called ECWC, Earth Care, Water Care. And we have serious issues of water. And for last many years, we have been fighting against Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And we have succeeded in closing down 3 bottling plants in our neighboring districts. Because these companies, they do not pay tax to the government and they're given full freedom. They pull out the water and there is serious issue of water depletion. Many farmers have stopped farming because of this water depletion, which is caused by these beverage companies, mainly Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And in India, we have only these 2 and both American companies. And now, Pope Francis wrote an encyclical a few years ago named Laudato Si, which means praise be God for the Mother Earth. That encyclical is called Laudato Si, and it's very popular. It's all about environment. Very beautiful article, and he challenges the world governments. He challenges the people living high standard lives. He asks people to put off the ACs, all that. So a lot of practical suggestions he has given, and he has analyzed the situation socially, politically, culturally, and he promotes indigenous environmental promotion. Not only that, he's promoting ethnic culture. So I carry on with the inspiration from this encyclical. I have a program called Laudato Si in Action. We call it LASIA in short. So we take up various movements, and I was glad that I participated in the farmers movement in Delhi for 3-4 days. I sat with them, spent the night in Tikri border, experienced their pains and agonies, and I've seen also the positive impact, the positive aspects of this, how morally and spiritually they are so deep rooted, solidly standing, and I really admire their morality and spirituality. So, and just this week on May 8th May, we saw large number of women. So I will speak, if you give me an opportunity, I will speak more of that later. So that is introduction about me. I have a theater troupe with a group. I go around speaking about environment through street play performances, stage play performances, songs, slogans, posters, all that. That's what the simple work we do here. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Anand. And I just want to say, about a year ago, I was honored to come to your beautiful office, the community center that you have, and to see with my own eyes the interfaith work that you are doing in Varanasi, which is a holy city for Hindus, and where there are tensions, but you and your colleagues are bringing everybody together in love. And I loved what you're doing. Let's move to Mrinali. Mrinali, will you introduce yourself and tell us what you're up to, where you are, and what motivates you?
Hello, everyone. My name is Mrinali, and I'm a student at Hunter College in New York City, where I'm studying political science and human rights. I am currently back home in Ghaziabad, which is close to the Ghazipur border where the protests are happening, all because of the pandemic. And I'm also part of a student-led organization in the US called the Students Against Hindutva Ideology, where we do research on the presence of Hindutva in the American electoral and political landscape. And we happen to find out that there are many RSS affiliates in the US, and there is a transaction of copious amounts of money between the US and India to just plant the ideology of Hindutva in the Indian diaspora in America. So what we usually do is we do research, we write reports, we conduct events such as this, we publish op-eds. And when I'm not studying or when I'm not involved at Students Against Hindutva Ideology, I am a freelance journalist, so I write. And I am not directly involved in environmental work at the moment, but I've been taking active part in the Ghazipur. And to me, I've been exclusive from climate change and environmental justice. And I think it's
Mrinali,
8 years old, and he's still protesting. And hello?
Mrinali, your audio was cutting out, so we didn't hear your last sentence.
Could you tell me what was the last sentence that you guys heard?
We are not heard it.
Can you hear me now though?
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, should I just talk about my motivating value since that's where I left?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I draw my inspiration and motivation from my grandfather, who's 80 years old, and he's a Sikh man. And he's a champion of social justice in my eyes. And he's taught me that the pursuit of social justice is a lifelong process. And he lives in the US, and every time there's a protest, he accompanies me to the protest. Last year in April, when BLM in the US was at its peak, he was still protesting in the streets with me. So yeah, my grandfather's 80, he's still protesting. So I know I have a long way to go, and I draw most of my inspiration from him.
Beautiful. Thanks, Mrinali. We'll hear more from you soon. Let's move to, Sister Muniza isn't here, so hopefully she'll reconnect. Let's move to Tahil. Tahil is in the US, and he's a close colleague of mine. Will you introduce yourself, Tahil?
Sure, Sunita ji. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Tahil Sharma. I am a Hindu Sikh interfaith activist based here in Los Angeles. So it's a little earlier than most of you who might be tuning in. My interfaith background is one of the main inspirations or motivations from my work because I come from a narrative of understanding not just the interconnected nature of the work that we do as folks of different religious, spiritual, indigenous, and secular backgrounds, but I believe deeply in the concept of interconnected justice, the idea that our work for the justice work that we specialize in should be able to impact other movements for justice. And when both of my faith traditions remind me of the strife and experiences of many people on the ground fighting for farmers' rights, fighting for ecological rights, fighting for the rights of the underrepresented and the detrimented in society, I'm definitely going to show up. And if I take it to, the depth at which my Hindu and Sikh tradition play a role in this, not only do I have to look at those traditions as my guides for, living a better life and helping others, but I also have to look to my own communities and remind them that if we are not living to our best abilities in our traditions, then we have to get a reality check. So I'm glad to be able to bring that invitation into this space.
Thank you so much, Tahil. We will let Sister Muniza introduce herself when she can reconnect, but Vijay, why don't you take us forward into our discussion today?
Thanks, Sunita, and lovely to know all your introductions. I would like by inviting Father Anand to just highlight the significance of the ongoing farmers movement in India, both for the farmers, for India, and as well for the world.
And let me just chime in to say, within this question and answer, let's keep our answers to under 3 minutes so that we can have everybody speak.
Okay. Before I speak to you about the significance of the present movement, I would like to analyze it a bit anthropologically. You know, in India, we have basically, when we see Indian situation through anthropological eyes, we have two categories of people, the tribals and the Aryans, basically two. And the tribals have a community feeling, and the Aryans, that is basically the Hindus, and uh, which include anthropologically the Muslims, Christians who are not tribals. So they have more. There is means there is because of the caste hierarchy, all that. There is also individualism. So because of the caste background, and we look at each other with casteist mentality. And so agriculture, although in the Hindu scriptures, it's written that that is the noblest profession. Farming is the noblest profession. Then comes all the other professions. At the same time, in practice, the farmers get the least respect. We wonder why this contrast between what's in the scripture in practice is just the opposite. Whereas in the tribal community, they respect all those who work, and in the casteist pyramidic hierarchy, we have people who labor, and the farmers who do really labor. They all are laborers in a way, so they are not respected. That's an unfortunate truth. People who teach, people who are in bureaucratic positions, people who make money, industrialists, or who get huge money legally or illegally, or even through wrong means, they are respected. So for centuries, the farmers have not been respected. And I would say, even after the independence, we know the history. Somehow or the other, the farmers have been the least taken care of. Although we see there is a difference. Today, I was visiting some of the villages. I saw the tube wells, the government owned tube wells. And I was discussing with some people. So it's in the first, second, what we have, the 5-year plan, Panchavarshiya Yojana, we say. It's during that time these tube wells were made, especially in Uttar Pradesh and many other parts of North India. Every village has got common tube wells, and the water is directed to canals, and lift irrigation from the rivers, water is directed to the fields through canals. All these were made during the 1950s and 60s. After 60s, nothing of that. Not a single tube well was made. So year by year, that caste mentality and neglect of the farmers is increasing and increasing. So today the farmers are asking this question. For you have MRP on all the products produced in the factories and companies. Why the farmers, and that is decided by the producer, why the farmers are not able to uh, say for themselves, that they are not able to determine what would be the price. So give the right to the farmers. Although it's not coming up strongly, many are still talking of MSP, minimum support price, and they are asking the government to announce the minimum support price. But there are some groups saying that we don't need MSP, we will determine, and we will put MRP on our farm products. So, and in the contest, you know that the 3 bills, beautiful names, all in favor of the farmers. And the government can go on saying, advocating that it is in favor of the farmers. But as we read through, it's all in favor of the capitalists, the industrialists. So this is the background, and the significance is that it is growing. It's not merely farmers' protest. I'm very happy to see that at least in Delhi and other parts of the country, in the cities, the students are coming out in support of the farmers. The others are coming out and saying that it is not farmers' movement, it is our movement. It is anyone who has to have food. They all have to fight for the rights of the farmers so that we can have food for our future, our generation and the future generations. So the movement is growing. That is the most significant thing. And it has also changed um, the patriotic system in which we live. It has changed. It is affecting the mentality of the farmers themselves. Now women are coming into where there was so much of gender inequality. Now women too are part of this. So it's even changing the social scenario, sociological approaches to society, all that is changing. So it's very, very significant.
Mrinali, we are so lucky that we have people speaking to us from the front lines in India, and that you guys have the courage to speak at a time where that is actually very, very dangerous. Mrinali, you're, as you said, living very close to one of the places where the farmers' protest is happening. And I know from one of your colleagues in Sahi that your family has actually opened your entire home to farmers protesting who need to come and rest and eat. So I'd love to hear your experiences from the protests, and if what you're seeing on the ground resonates with what Father is saying about youth and women participation and the vitality of the protests. But I also would like to ask you, we're consumers of media, and the world has noticed this crazy situation where young protesters in India are being arrested, targeted, and celebrities and activists outside India are being targeted in social media, and even FIRs are placed against them. So can you connect what you're seeing on the ground with this Twilight Zone resonance in the international media and explain what's going on?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for asking me that question, because I don't usually get to talk about the farmers' protest with other than the farmers and my family, just because the environment is so polarized. We just avoid talking about politics a lot in the surroundings these days. But yeah, so I've been going to the protest ever since the very inception of the protests at Ghazipur. I remember the first day that I went, there were just over 200 people at the protests. So it was easy for me to just be one person walking in with supplies, masks and blankets and water bottles. And that would be sufficient for everyone. And then gradually, over a period of 3 or 4 months, I saw the protests sort of, proliferate, and people made makeshift homes for themselves. There are toilets, there are dispensaries for people now. So it's sort of become like a little township within the city now. So it's very beautiful to see how people, have stood firm through these 4 months. And as to how we've seen the media tout this protest as being anti-government, and as the protest was slowly gaining momentum, the government tried to paint it with communal colors. I personally have seen amazing solidarity in people at the protest. I've seen people try to diss the efforts of the government to fragment the protests on the basis of communal lines. I usually go to the protests, on festivals. I see people celebrate, Ravidas Jayanti, Gurpurab, Women's Day with so much togetherness that it's almost moving to see the solidarity at the protests. And but we have seen a lot of positive moments throughout the protests. We've seen some horrific things happen to the protests, what happened on 26 January, and the anti-Sikh sentiment that sort of, was born out of it was very disheartening to see. To me personally, one of the most horrific moments was in regards to what happened to Disha Ravi, because that had really close home to me because she happens to be 22-year-old, an activist just like me. And she shared a toolkit, which was a Google Doc that actually Greta Thunberg designed. And Disha Ravi is this activist who runs the India chapter of Fridays for Future, which is a student resistance movement founded by Greta Thunberg. And yeah, after Disha's arrest, I was kind of afraid to speak up myself. And I was approached by another panel to speak just a few days after Disha's arrest. And I outrightly refused because I was really scared. I thought that they would come after me or my family, just like they came after Disha Ravi. And I would often sort of question my fears and, ask my friends if they were unfounded or unconfirmed, because to be honest, I'm not that big of an activist. With the little activism that I do, what possibly could go wrong? I just share like a tweet or two, or I just, share posts on social media. But I think in the current scenario, a word is, enough to implicate you for something that you never intended to say or do. And yeah, and then what happened there after the attacks on Greta, and how the Ministry of External Affairs and a lot of A-lister Bollywood actors came out and had a concerted effort to call out tweets by international stars such as Rihanna and Meena Harris. A lot of Indian actors in India also, like, who were showing solidarity with the farmers' protests. So I think in the end, I would just like to say that I have been on ground, and I'm really mesmerized to see how the interests and the integrity of this country are very, very misplaced. This is not, a struggle about impinging on the sovereignty of a particular nation. It's a fight about fundamental human rights, the right to food, the right to a livable wage, the right to clean air and water. And I think people are hyping up the protests very wrongly, in a very, very wrong light.
Thank you, Mrinali, for such a wonderful field diary that you shared with us. Since I have also been there, I would like to highlight that you can experience the fundamentals of Sikhism itself. The moment I spent in the border, Singhu border, I felt I was in a Gurudwara with people greeting me, with langars happening around. At the same time, it showed the heart of Indian democracy. There were flags hoisted, national flags. There were the preamble of the constitution very visibly, and it felt safe. I share what you shared, Mrinali. Sometimes it's fearful. My parents are scared for my safety. But I think when you hear the voices of the farmers, young farmers speaking in Delhi, you know that they have read these laws. They understand what's happening. They are able to connect what effect green revolution has had on their soil. There is also this identity of Punjab youth being drug addicts, being spoiled brats as an outcome of the income that came in after green revolution. They want to change that. But since Mrinali, you and Sunita are here, I would like you both to just take this time to see how the portrayal of women farmers, when we say the word farmer, it doesn't come to our mind that it can be a female farmer too. What has been the role of media, or how was the portrayal of female farmers in this movement, and even in this a few years in India? We have seen many examples, the incidents in Amravati, or how women came up during the Women's Day rally in huge numbers at the farmers' protest. What is your perspective, being females, in this discussion about this portrayal of how significant, or the lack of portrayal, however you would like to say it?
Well, I'm going to let Mrinali answer the question because she's on the ground, but I'll just add to Vijay's question by saying that I'm really perplexed and horrified at the images that I've seen, the videos that I've seen of women farmers protesting in Amravati, Andhra Pradesh. And on International Women's Day, what I'm seeing is that there was this mass police brutality against them. They were trying to get to the Kanakadurga temple on International Women's Day, and they were prevented from doing that. And they were met with police who were brutal. And also, from what I can understand, I'm Telugu, speaking. And so I've been watching some of the Telugu news. And what I can make out is that a lot of what was happening was sexual harassment of these women protesters by the police. So I'm trying to figure out what exactly happened in Amaravati. But to counter that, what I'm also seeing is that the images of the protests are very mixed. They're on International Women's Day, our friend, the journalist Arfa Khanum, was live streaming from one of the farmers' protests, and it was oceans of women who were there. So all of this is very inspiring. But Renali, you tell us, because you are there on the ground.
Right. I can only talk about the protests and the women's participation in the movement from the standpoint of Ghazipur, because that's what I've been. And I unfortunately can't talk about over the years and what happened a few years ago, because I perhaps was, you know, a school-going girl back then with not a lot of opinions. But I've been, I mean, like Women's Day, 8th March at Ghazipur, we had, you know, an event solely dedicated for women, and women were given the stage to speak up, you know, against various struggles that they were facing, not just in regards to the farmers' protest. And I think that was amazing. I personally have been, you know, making and forming allies with a lot of female farmer protesters, and it's kind of inspirational and incredible to sort of hear how they've been managing the protests alongside their households. And this one amazing lady happened to stay over at my house for a night because she needed shelter. And she told me how she has never stepped out of her house late in the night, but just because of the protest, she's been trying to manage her house and the protest. So she takes a bus back home late in the night, and then she calls up her other allies at the protest to let them know that she's reached home safely. But, you know, in the middle, we had no internet connections at the protest because there was internet shutdown at protest sites and, you know, surrounding areas. And I've seen incredible women activists be there. I've seen mothers come with their little kids, for 3 or 4, to the protest, and they eat at the community kitchens. A lot of the media personnel happen to be female. Some of the media personnel who I see in the media house happen to be women, and they braved, you know, the biting cold during the winter. They stay there until late in the night, and you know, they've been doing their job. They've been on the tarmac. I've also sensed that the farmers' protest over, you know, the period of the past 4 months has become more organized. So they now have a vigilance team which sort of makes sure that there are no outsiders or there are no hecklers that sort of come heckle, you know, women protesters who are trying to spend a night at the protests, or, you know, no hecklers in the day who would sort of come bother with female protesters. So I think women have been have played a very integral part in the protest, and the farmers' protest is recognizing that. Unfortunately, I don't think the media as much has been highlighting their, you know, role in the protests. Yeah, but that's my perspective.
And I also know that women's organizations in India have really, like, in a very organized way, expressed solidarity and shown up for the farmers.
Yeah.
And also, a year ago, it was the Anti-Caa protests that were really captivating. I mean, I was in India last winter, and every place I went, small town, big city, had an Anti-Caa protest, and it lasted for days, if not weeks. And only because of COVID did it come to an end. And most of those were led by women or had a huge female participation. And so, I mean, as somebody from India, it just makes me incredibly, you know, inspired and proud, but also deeply sad, because the side by side with that is what we are seeing is relentless, state, with impunity, violence against women, brutal rapes. The latest situation where Chief Justice was actually saying that a rapist should, asking rapists to marry the victim of a rape. And the stories that we're hearing are just unacceptable and intolerable. So both are side by side. I'm going to move to Tahil. Tahil, Father Anand started to talk about the casteist perspective that pervades Indian society, but also some of the struggles which we are all united in have a caste perspective as well. So I know that you were very moved by the caste aspect of state repression of farmers' protests. So why don't you tell us your thoughts on this?
Thank you, Sunita ji. Yeah. So as a big part of, the experience of getting to learn about what's been happening in all of the different aspects of these farmer protests, one of the biggest stories that came out along with Disha Ravi's, arrest and subsequent bail was the story of Nadeep Kaur, who's a Dalit rights labor activist who had been doing a lot of work in Punjab, comes from a legacy of organizers who've been doing this work, who was arrested with one of her colleagues, Shiv Kumar. And, their experience after being in jail made it very clear what the impact is like when you are speaking up for an injustice and you also happen to be from a community that is consistently marginalized. Because the treatment of Nadeep Kaur and Shiv Kumar was very clear. Um, Medical reports came out about Shiv Kumar and having bones broken, his nail beds broken, experiencing a lot of distress and episodes of crying. Nadeep Kaur had mentioned that the police officers who had attacked her as well were saying that you are basically the person that's supposed to be cleaning things. Why are you speaking up for other people? And when you have that kind of a dehumanizing nature to what consistently seems to be a hierarchical system in India, a de facto process experience that keeps people low, keeps people marginalized, keeps them oppressed, the expectations of not wanting to change that de facto experience means that it needs to change sooner rather than later. No truth can really hide the fact that this has been a very defining part of the current Indian democratic process that really needs to change, because both of the major political parties nationally and many regional and local ones still appeals to this idea that you need to appeal specifically to the sentiments of caste to be able to win your vote bank and to be able to serve the powers that be. But at the same time, this actually is a reflection of the deeper reformation that's needed at both the societal level and the theological level of how India needs to be moving forward. Because in a situation like Shiv Kumar, where Hinduism has this repugnant system of caste, we also are recognizing that Nadeep is a part of that system as not being a Hindu. She's acknowledged as a Mazhabi Sikh, someone who, in a system where we are talking about egalitarianism, equality, the approach that Sikhism takes generally as a concept of practice of faith, is actually not being followed. It's actually fallen trapped to the same system that we pushed against since the time of Guru Nanak, which means we're not honoring our faith system. We're not actually practicing a genuine theology. We're using a theology of convenience to keep ourselves in the power and privileges that, reward us all the time for just existing. And this is an invitation, I think, for us to dig deeper than just creating the reforms and the laws and the necessities necessary to uplift communities. That means we have to literally deconstruct the systems that are allowing this systemic oppression to progress and flourish in the way that it is. And it's going to require a lot of generational change. I think this is precisely why the farmer protests are so important, because when women are showing up, when marginalized communities are showing up on the front lines, when they're willing to call out the BS that comes from those in power and those in privilege, that's when you begin to realize that reform is actually possible. It's going to be met with violence, unfortunately, because that is how the state is functioning. And it's functioned that way for decades. Whether we look at the emergency from the 70s, whether we look at this anti-Sikh pogroms in the 80s, or whether we're looking at what happened with the Babri Masjid up until the 90s and 2000s, whoever is in power wants to keep the power. And it's the people's opportunity to say that the power was never yours to begin with, it was ours.
That's a great thought that you left us with, Tahil. I mean, it's the fact, but it's also so philosophical to think about it. But I would like to ask the panel as well as Dr. Fletcher. You can also give in your comments on this one. What is the connection between the farmer struggle and the environment, and how is Hindutva harming the planet? Uh, Feel free to take your turns.
Reflecting from the perspective of the patterns that I spoke about earlier, what we see is that the more that control over the land, over the water, is placed in the hands of major multinational corporations and governments that are eager to do their bidding, that is absolutely the pattern that leads to the destruction of the environment and the destruction of the climate. When there is no real power left for and control at the local level, that inevitably leads to grave problems. And it's, these things are connected, as you all have said, because you don't get that kind of control over nature without violent control over people. And so I think that's where we have to understand the interconnectedness of these systems. It's about violent control of nature, violent control of people, neo-colonialist control over money and over politics, and that a justification of that by getting people whipped up in a fear that if they don't behave in that way, they're going to lose power. So there's this mind game. I mean, Father Anand talked about that some, where people get whipped up in a frenzy because they believe they have to act in an immoral and violent way to protect themselves in the long term, when it couldn't be more the opposite.
Do any of our other panelists have anything to add to Fletcher's phrase? Go ahead.
I would like to say that when we look into the tribal communities, especially in India, in states like Jharkhand, Bengal, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, they are not big farmers, but they work constantly in the field. And you can call those states the richest states in India, because not in the farming sense, but in the in the ground below there is all the mines, the minerals. So iron is there, bauxite is there, magnesium is there, mica, and so many things, and precious metals. And so the eyes, as Mr. Reverend Harper said, the eyes of the capitalists, industrialists, and the government itself, multinational companies have their eyes on that. So, and they do not have any respect for life. They do not have respect for environment, and they have captured those lands by paying money to the government in power. And we have so many such cases, and thousands, millions of people have been displaced. The Adivasis, the tribals, have been displaced from Jharkhand, and they are pulling cycle rickshaws in Kolkata, in Delhi, in Mumbai, in Patna, in Ranchi, all the towns. And the owners of land have become just laborers and nothing to do with farming. They are just pushed out. So we see that that's the case of the farmers in the tribal belt. But in the other places, we see similar thing. It's the lower caste people, the Dalits and the OBCs, they are the real people who are working, who are sweating in the field. The upper caste people, they own the land. And the people who do real farming are the lower caste people. So this, what I was referring to earlier and what Tahil was saying very powerfully. So this casteism is seen so powerful that they do not have respect for them, and they find it easy to chase them away. And then they also find it easy to bring in multinational companies. And this, all the three bills, at least one among them, the very first one, which speaks about opening up the markets, finishing up a APMC, Agriculture Product Marketing Centers, and allowing the private companies to have the APMC. So that is giving opportunity for the multinational companies. There is the other bill, the third bill, which is about corporate farming. It's so dangerous for, very especially for the marginal farmers, small scale farmers, the peasants who do farming in a small sector, but it is a full-time job for them. So they lose everything. Their livelihood is lost with that. Am I speaking to, answering to the question?
Yes, and maybe Tahil and also Vijay, I think you have an answer to this question as well. And maybe you too, Mrinali, especially because you speak to farmers all the time. Any other, and I wanted everybody to keep it brief because we're running out of time. Any other contribution to the question, what is the relationship between the farmers' protests and the environment? Specifically, how is Hindutva, this regime, harming the planet? Any other thoughts to add?
Yeah. So the way that Hindutva is, I think, playing its biggest role in harming the planet is by playing the game of standing out internationally as being this seated, beautiful way of being able to honor the environment and the sacred, because Hindus believe that as a general concept, but then using the same narrative as a call to action or an emergency to people on the ground that is telling them that, oh, you're being attacked because you can't light fireworks for Diwali. You're being attacked because you're not having enough children, so you should have 10 children you can't afford. You are being attacked because anything that has to do with your festivities or abilities to practice things that are harming the environment are being inconvenienced. It is therefore a repugnance towards your ability of being Hindu. That trap that they constantly keep using, from the approach to passing many of the bills that caused the protests to get to the level that they did, by bypassing democratic practices, by using democracy to destroy democracy, by not using parliamentary procedures, by not dialoguing with people, and just retaining the idea that we're right and might is right, is the way that Hindutva is destroying the environment and the planet.
Anyone else?
Just since you
to this
mentioned,
question, yes, did I interrupt someone? To this question which Sunita asked, I feel also that the fundamentalists or the religious fanatics who are coming to power, with power, political power in their hands, they speak of development. If they are, in fact, religiously deep-rooted, if they are really spiritual people, they should be talking about returning to the nature. But they speak about development sugar-coated with religion. So to me, this religious, so-called religious talks do not seem to be practically in their life. They are cut off from any sort of spirituality. Religion is used only as a tool for coming into power, for destruction of the environment. They find it easy. We have come, the people of this country, the majority religion have elected us. So we have the elected people, we have the popular party in power, and the people want us to rule this country. And for that sake, development and selling themselves and the country to the crony capitalists, multinational companies, and with using all their authoritarian strategies at the destruction for the destruction of environment. We have series of problems. About I said about water depletion. We have the fossil fuel problem, and the dry ash of the burning of the coals, destroying the uh, what do you call environmental causing environmental pollution in the cities, causing various illnesses. So we have series of problems. But then anyone who questions this, we have the example of Greenpeace and other environmental international groups. So that's why Disha Ravi and Greta all are looked with suspicious eyes. They are uh, questioning of religion. Tahil said very well and pointed to Diwali and all these things. And we see that these are using the common people, ordinary people, to especially the youth, for big rallies in the name of religion, many yatras, pilgrimages like Kanwar Yatra and all that. There's no upper caste people going, but they carry the flags, they carry the banners and posters of the party, and all in the name of religion. So unfortunately, I would say that the backward caste, the Dalits, are not realizing how they are manipulated, uh, used by utilized by the political parties in power in the name of religion, for destruction of the environment, for even for communal riots, for causing religious division. So there is and they are planning it so systematically. We are working hard, but some or other our political system is so much that the other parties are not able to come up
Right.
with this type of strategies. They are not able to withstand that powerfully.
I think as a practicing Hindu, I always feel Hinduism for me has been about ahimsa paramo dharma. Whereas the example that Tahil gave, that why don't we question other religions? Why should we be questioned when Diwali we burn crackers? I mean, the background of Diwali is a festival of lights. It's not a festival of noise. Without realizing this, we are propagating that, why are we being stopped from burning crackers in our own city? Uh, at our own country. At the same time, when I spoke to young farmers, I was very keen to get their perspective on what do they actually think the current system in agriculture is helpful for them. But they have very deep understanding of what the green revolution in the country has been gone through. They cited the example of the cancelled train that runs from Amritsar, and how soil has been affected due to various kind of chemicals that has been used and propagated by the government to be used. And the manufacturers of these are big US corporates or various corporates across the globe. Uh, I also remember an instance when I attended a consultation which was held in terms of, I think it was 10 years ago, to ask the farmers across the country about what do they think about BT brinjal and BT cotton. Like the farmers were consulted by the then Agriculture Minister Jairam Ramesh. They actually didn't go out with the BT cotton because farmers resisted it. But I don't see that here. So there is dismantling of democracy by claiming it to be done in a democratic process when we can't even hear what the parliamentarians are talking, and the Rajya Sabha TV audio is taken away. So I see the authoritarianism and the claiming of using the name Hindutva to paint Hinduism in a way, at one sense, at the same time wanting to control power, be it the caste hierarchy or the Brahmanism, the patriarchy, deep rooted within the control. So I think with this, I would like to ask the panelists, as a young citizen of the world, what would you say to a young person anybody in the world who cares about democracy and who cares about the planet, and is a thing that's happening in India today an internal matter, as some people might seem to suggest. So take a moment each and just respond to this, addressing the youth of the world.
Would you repeat that question once again, Vijay?
Yeah, sure. So what would you say to a young person in the world who cares about the planet and democracy? And also, is the what's happening in India, is it an internal matter?
And let me add to that question something that Fletcher just typed into the chat. You know, as a young person somewhere in the world, maybe in New York City or in London, you know, is having this question of how to show up in solidarity, there might also be a feeling of, I don't want to overstep. I don't want to repeat evils committed by colonial powers. So as a young person somewhere in the world wants to step up in solidarity, what would you say to them? Mrinali, why don't you go?
Yeah, I mean, if I were to talk to somebody my age who's interested in social justice and they want to do something about it, I would ask them to never give up, because I almost gave up a few weeks ago when the incident with the Sharavi happened. And I actually stopped going to the protest for 2 weeks because I honestly was very scared. And on one hand, I was living, under the fear of being surveilled, or, under the fear of being attacked by the police. And on the other hand, I was living with the guilt of not participating because I was being cowed down. And I think personally for me, between living with a sense of fear and living with guilt is a feeling that sort of heavily dawned upon my heart than fear did. So I think it's safe to say that we can hinge social justice and resistance movements on hope, because until we have people like all of us who are ready to have a very secular and civil conversation on how the present and the future looks like for us, I think that's something that's very important, and that's all that matters. And by instilling fear in our minds and in our hearts, they are trying to sort of intimidate us, but by not giving up, we're just emerging as a stronger community. And I think that's very, very important. And as to what's happening in India being an internal matter, I think there's no such thing as an internal matter, because human rights are universal and the earth belongs to all of us. And this is it's important to be a part of a global movement for human rights and the environment and climate justice and abolition and social justice, because human rights are universal and they are inviolable. And
Yay!
we all live on the earth.
I vote for you, Mrinali.
Thank you.
Tahil, why don't you go?
Yeah, to the point of speaking to someone my age, I would agree with Mrinali and say, don't give up, but also remind them that they're living India's legacy as the generation of fighting back, which is a part of our legacy of justice and rebellion against tyranny. I don't care for, having colonial powers either. I'm totally for decolonizing. That also doesn't mean that I'm so repressed in my life that I'd like to replace my abusers with domestic ones. I'm okay with not having abusers or people in power oppressing me all the time, whether foreign or domestic. So let's actually live into, the approach of justice as being a very interconnected thing. You can't just get support from people because you're doing the right things. If we want to be accountable to each other, that means we have to correct each other when we do wrong things. Critique is not insult, and it's not a deprivation of acknowledging the values of a system or a tradition. It means acknowledging we can do better, because there's always room to do better.
Father.
Yeah, I would say to the question Vijay asked whether it's an internal matter. It's not an internal matter. And for me as an Indian, holding to the value, the principle of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the whole world is one. If the oil is spilled into the sea, the ocean by US or other Western countries, I protest here. And if the penguins are killed or the dolphins are killed in any of the oceans or the inland waters or in the Arctic or Antarctic area, we protest here because we feel the pain. It's so if the farmers in India are protesting, we expect people other places to be in support because it's an environmental issue affecting the entire earth. And if Greta Thunberg is protesting and she is articulating her anguish and pain, I really admire her. And I can experience and feel the pain of her because she has a care and concern, a deep anguish for the entire world, entire nature, the entire environment. So it's an international issue, and we should seek support from all the entire world. People, all who have concern for environment, should come forward, just as Reverend Harper is expressing. And I believe many more people will come from different parts of the world with an anguish for, it's not merely for the farmers, it's for the food, for environment, a concern for the nature, as already expressed by Tahil and Vijay, that the cancer train, all that, it's a real issue. The other day we spoke about Swaminathan's green revolution and all. It has done some good, maybe some economic boost, but it has done more harm. And in the longer term, we understand the evil consequences of that green revolution today. The cancer train, the train from Punjab to Ahmedabad is a result of that. So it has to stop somewhere. With all such scientific knowledge and understanding, today we are not able to put a control on the harm being done. Then when can we do that? It's high time that we act together, the entire world acts together.
So thank you, Father. Before we go into a Q&A session, and I invite any audience members who have a question to put it in the chat. And Reverend Fletcher, I'm hoping you'll facilitate that Q&A session. One more last quick fire round for our wonderful, just really inspiring panelists. Sometimes when we do our advocacy, especially in the Hindu community, we are told that we're exaggerating, that either we're exaggerating and sort of, perpetuating things that aren't true, or that we are just outright lying and that we're anti-India, anti-national, and we're harming the country. And things like this are said to us. So in closing, I would love for each one of you to tell us two things. We are concerned in Hindus for Human Rights about democracy in India and about the reign of Hindu nationalism that we believe is harming human beings and therefore the planet. Can you tell us what it is in this moment that concerns you the most? What are you most concerned about? But also, each one of you has talked about many instances and movements of resistance that are giving us hope and inspiration. So why don't you also tell us where you are getting the most hope and inspiration from? So why don't each one of you go around quick fire before Reverend Fletcher takes us forward in Q&A. And thank you all so much for being with us in this discussion. Tahil, why don't you go?
I think my biggest concern for India right now is it's gone from being free to partly free. And I don't want to see India become not free at all anymore. But what I think I have a hope for is that people are challenging the idea of freedom in India and turning it on its head to be able to strive for a better freedom that India has never seen before.
Nali.
I think I am the most concerned about the fact that there are people who are unable to see through what the current regime is trying to do in terms of, crony capitalism, in terms of right-wing fanatic Hinduism. And I grew up, in a Hindu family, and I have so many friends and so many relatives who just refuse to look through what the government is trying to do and how it's trying to, in a very pronounced manner, perpetuate very traditional and very obsolete ideas of, the caste system and misogyny and, being anti-poor. And I mean, while I do want to say that there's a lot of hope that surrounds us. I mean, I really draw inspiration from, conversations like these and, people who muster the courage to speak up. And especially to all the farmers out there, they've been out there for more than 100 days now. I think that is, an exceptional display of challenging what the government is doing right now. So yeah, just finding solidarity in each other.
Thanks, Manali. Father Anand.
Well, I'm sorry I got disturbed in between. Would you, in short, ask me the question once again?
Yes, we're doing a quick fire round of what you are most concerned about, your deepest concern for India, and then where you get the most hope from as you think about that concern.
So what is the question?
The question is, what is your biggest fear or concern for India, and where do you derive the most hope from as we all address that?
Yeah. I think the negative things, the fear, all that is, I believe it will pass off. And I am more hopeful. And it's the farmers who are giving me the hope. And the way they are behaving, it's wonderful. And the way when, huge iron nails are placed on the road, the farmers are carrying the soil there and planting flower plants as gift to the oppressors. That's really wonderful. Like that, many symbols of positive power, moral power, spiritual power emanating from them. So the farmers' leadership is so wonderful. So even for the other problems of we have the faith related rivalry and riots, communal riots, all that I think these farmers are going to give a solution. Democracy will return back to India because of the farmers. I'm very hopeful.
Vijay.
Thanks, Sunita. It was so inspiring to hear the three panelists. I think for me, the biggest fear is I remember the day when I visited Berlin and was standing at the Holocaust Museum, reading all the testimonials of survivors. And I sat there for 2 hours thinking, I just hope it doesn't happen anywhere again. This was 2 years back, and I never thought I would sit one day in India and think we might actually see this day coming soon. The kind of deep-rooted hatred I see in close circles, the propaganda being used through WhatsApp, Facebook, and the institutional hijacking that has been like Twitter, Facebook would target a certain kind of tweets, but not anything that would do with the major politicians from the Hindutva group itself. This is what scares me, and I hope my worst fears do not come true. My hope lies in the way I have seen consistent efforts of youth across the world. It started off from the JNU attacks, the attack on Jamia in colleges in India, how students stood up against it. I could see a lot of youth participating in anti-Caa protests. I could see visuals from Thailand with huge protests and days of demonstrations and youth organizing themselves. I saw how youth voted Trump out. And I see how young farmers are standing up with their elder farmers shoulder to shoulder, maybe re-identifying the farmer within themselves. So I think the farmers are reclaiming India today. And I see a lot of hope from this. And of course, to all the wonderful souls, everyone on who are speaking today, people like you, whenever I hear you speaking, it gives me more strength to fight all the small battles that I have here in India. Thank you.
I'll just add that on Shivratri, I couldn't think of anything more important and beautiful to do except, to be with all of you, dreaming of a better future. So thank you all. Let's go to Fletcher to ask the questions that are coming up in chat, and your own questions too, Fletcher.
Yep, and just in the 10 minutes that we have left. So one question that's emerged is that it seems that in the midst of the issues that that we've been talking about, that the fact that you all, as people from different religious and spiritual backgrounds and communities, are able to come together is a very important part of the solution. And interested to hear, understanding that can be fraught. Any reflections that you all have about how a strong public interfaith solidarity can be a meaningful part of the response to what's happening and to Hindutva?
I mean, I can chime in quickly before others to say that our coalitions of resistance inside India and outside India, coalitions of resistance against authoritarianism, against Hindutva, they have always been robust and diverse. But what has been missing from them is a Hindu presence. And considering that we're talking about, an aberration of Hinduism, a hijacking of Hinduism to conduct this oppression that we're in right now, there have to be, I believe anyway, Hindus among those resisting, and that's certainly what Hindus for Human Rights, that's why we are showing up as Hindus. We would all much rather, I think, keep our Hinduism private in our home shrine and come out as secular citizens. I think most Hindus that I know are more comfortable that way. The Hindu practice is so individual, and it's your personal practice and relationship with the divine. And my husband, who's Jewish, says, each Hindu he has met is a religion of one. So I don't know if all faiths are that way, but I think our job is to wake up and mobilize Hindus to be a part of coalitions of resistance. And I want to say, to mobilize the coalitions of resistance to make space for Hindus to show up. Because what has happened, sadly, is that this conflation of Hindutva and Hinduism is not just happening on the right, but also when we are seen by our colleagues and allies on the left, there's an understandable question of where is this person coming from, but we have to make space for each other. And we won't defeat Hindutva unless Hindus show up. We won't defeat caste unless Hindus have a deep spiritual transformation to leave caste behind. But let me ask our panelists to answer the question.
I would like to share an experience we had 2 weeks ago. From 26th February, 26th, 27th, and 28th February, we, the social activists, which is basically an interfaith organization here, we made an attempt. The majority religion, Hindu religion, has got so many beautiful symbols. So we used those symbols. The one symbol is the Panch-Koshi Yatra, which means one course means 5 kilometers. Panch-Kosh means 25 kilometers. So there is a 24 to 25 kilometer long pilgrimage around the city of Varanasi. So we had a 3-day Panch-Koshi Yatra for what we called it, the dialogue, the farmers' dialogue Panch-Koshi Yatra. So we started with the Hindu ritual of having a dip in the Ganga river at Manikarnika Ghat, the cremation ghat, and we had the Hindu symbols on us, and we are Muslims, Christians, and Hindus, and we didn't have any problem with that. And we started with some Hindu prayers, and then they asked me to inaugurate, and we, of course, it's done on foot, but we made a change. We went on motorbikes, and we covered the whole thing within 3 days, and had many public meetings. We distributed pamphlets all about the farmers' protest. the bills, the harm it can do, and what it means, and the consequences, and talking about the protest. And it was a wonderful result. We had many thousands and thousands of people um, dialoguing with us, and we managed to disseminate the message. What I am trying to say, for every issue, we should have interfaith activities and actions, positive, affirmative actions, in respecting the religion of the other. We don't have to, in any way, uh, uh, accept the religion and practices of the others as our own. We don't have to change, but we respect, affirm, and we go with each other. And we say that we are diverse, but we love, we respect each other, and we work together. And in place like India, religion is so deep rooted, and we can't think of anything other. Even for us in India, secularism is something religious, because we respect all religions. Secularism in India doesn't mean negation of religion, but we uh, affirm the diversity of religions and the equal importance of every faith. So I think a lot can be done. And I believe Reverend Harper and your Green Faith movement can guide us, and we can work together for this.
Mm-hmm. That's so beautiful, Father Anand. Reverend Fletcher, can we take the last couple of minutes that we have and try and at least one person address any of the questions that came up? I'm sorry, I maybe stay over a couple of minutes. For the people who asked questions, I don't want to let them go.
Yep, absolutely. And what I can do is, why don't I name the questions, and then maybe one person could speak to each of them or something like that. So there was one question about how to address the problem of casteism. Another question about how to raise awareness about climate change. And then another question about how to build alliances and relationships between yourselves and others like you, and activists who would want to be supportive in other countries and who are working on similar issues manifest in distinctive ways in their own cultures and countries. So casteism, how to raise awareness about climate change, how to build bridges.
Why don't you all jump in? Anybody?
I can talk about casteism very briefly though, but as Sunita ji just mentioned that, Hindus need to step up to be able to abolish the caste system and denounce it. I read a book a few days ago by Vandana Sonalkar, and one of the things that she mentioned in the book was that no one can actually shirk off or shake off their upper caste religion, but the one thing that they can do to denounce the caste system is to sort of condemn the very system and the very brand of Hinduism, that keeps perpetuating those kind of norms. And until Hindus don't step up to sort of denounce, condemn, and abolish this very vile form of mainstream Hinduism that we're seeing surfacing around us these days, I don't think we can fight the caste system. And just for like young people like me to be aware of their caste privileges and denounce them and speak up, that's something I've been seeing around me, and it's very disappointing. I see my friends not realizing how privileged they are, and how their privilege is letting them be silent in such a crucial time. And for everyone to just be aware of their caste privilege, I think is very important, because growing up, I don't think parents talk about the caste system or people's caste, and they only emphasize on how it's legally abolished, but they don't talk about how their kids actually grow up with caste privilege ever since the day that they were born. So I think instead of consigning caste privileges on them, they need to be made aware of why they are where they are, and just be more aware of their surroundings.
One thing that I want to actually add to Mrinali's point is, it's also not just about acknowledging the privilege and using it to abolish the system. Abolishing the system also means relinquishing the power that comes with the privileges and equalizing the playing field, which means if there are people who are Dalit, Adivasi, of the scheduled castes, of those voices that are underrepresented in almost every single space, raise their voice, give them the platform, amplify the work that they're doing so that they know that you can be taken seriously as an ally and not just someone that's talking. Because oftentimes a lot of the folks that come in as allies to anti-caste work want to be the speakers, want to be the leaders, but won't actually center their voices. So me speaking right now is probably a very good example of that, to call out that privilege. Do what you can to equalize the voice by bringing them in to speak as well.
Maybe the final word to somebody who can answer the question about climate change. What can we all do to come together in an interfaith movement? I mean, Fletcher's doing it, but all of us interfaith Indian people come together to address climate change would be a great note to end on. I don't know if Vijay, Father, anybody wants to answer.
Shivam Shelke is asking this question, and it has popped up just now.
Mm-hmm.
The basic principle of religion is the cause of environmental destruction and all that is basically consumerism, and it is very true. And consumerism itself is becoming a sort of modern religion, and consumerism is doing a lot of harm. And so whereas religion, the deep rooted teachings of religion, in every religion, most of the it speaks about simplicity of life. Simplicity is the easier way to God. And for example, in Christianity, Jesus speaks about taking the narrow path instead of taking the wider path. So the narrow path or the narrow gate is simplicity, respect for the nature, respect for one another, and less privilege to oneself and more privileges to others. So that is there. Hinduism also speaks about really simplicity or sadhagi, humility. All these values are there in every religion. So, but we need to help people to differentiate between uh, faith, religion, and the dominant culture, uh, which is most, dominated by selfishness, greed. People make selfishness and greed part of their faith, some or other. The way, I'm not in any way criticizing Hinduism or in India, it's for the Christians and Hindus and Muslims all, we have a tendency to bribe even God, saying, offering laddus, offering candles, and offering days. We even Christians do that. I being a Christian, and sometimes during this period we have this Lenten period. Many Christians try to bribe God by fasting, by counting these many days I have fasted, so you must uh, meet my demands. All that. So it's actually coming from greed. It's coming from selfishness, whereas uh, seeking less for oneself and seeking for the will of God, seeking transformation in one's life, that is, I think, the basic principle of religion. So we need to the question of Shivam Shelke I am answering. So we have to constantly turn our minds and reflect and take the path not merely of religion, but more of spirituality, which is common to all religions. Spirituality is the most important thing, not religion.
Yes, and I would love to just share a quote from a verse from the Rig Veda. The Rig Veda actually has a line that says, and I'm paraphrasing, we can accumulate wealth with thousands of hands. We are permitted to do that with hundreds of hands, but we must also distribute wealth with thousands of hands. And if we can own it, it's an affirmation of our material lives, but it calls us to the spiritual life and the life of compassion and generosity that Father Anand is talking about. And perhaps if we all did that, we could stop harming our planet. Let me invite Reverend Fletcher, my brother, to close us out.
Well, thank you all so much. It's been I have learned an enormous amount from listening to all of you, and hope very much that we can do more work together in the future. I think the only way we are able to create the world that reflects our values and our beliefs at the deepest level is by working together. So many thanks to all of you for taking the time to talk. This may be a very unreligious way to close a panel like this, but I think there's a wonderful Irish saying, which goes, "Is this a private argument or can anybody get involved?" And I think this is the kind of conversation that we need all of us to be engaged in. It matters deeply, and what you all have said today courageously is such an important example. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this, and thank you to Sunita ji for her bold and galvanizing presence and invitation to us all to come together. So many thanks. And
Wow, so much. And happy Shivratri to everyone.
It was
I know.
wonderful listening to all of you, Mrinalini and Reverend Fletcher Harper, Tahil, Vijay, and thank you, Sunita and others for this opportunity. And we hope continue using this platform. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you.
Let's stay
Namaste.
connected. Namaste.
Okay, namaste.